7:10 in the morning. The American supply vessel Ocean Atlas was carving a white wake through the dark green waters of the Strait of Hormuz. This was not a standard transit. 3 Iranian fast attack craft had already broken from their patrol pattern and were now screaming toward the ship's port side. The crew had no way of knowing if this was a routine inspection or the beginning of a regional crisis. The air was thick with the scent of salt and diesel fuel. It was already 85 degrees. High above, the sky was a pale and cloudless blue. On the bridge, Captain Miller gripped the edge of the chart table. He was a veteran of 20 years at sea. He had seen harassment before. This felt different. The speedboats were not weaving. They were holding a steady intercept vector. Miller spoke to the young radio operator. Signal the littoral combat ship USS Indianapolis. Tell them we have 3 bogies closing. Speed 40 knots. The operator's hands moved quickly over the keys. The Indianapolis is 11 minutes out. They are pushing their engines to the limit. They are coming, sir. Miller stared at the lead speedboat. It was less than 500 meters away now. We do not have 11 minutes. Across the water, the lead Iranian craft bounced violently over the swell. Commander Reza held onto the rail. He looked at the massive steel hull of the American ship. His orders from the command center in Bandar Abbas were absolute. They were to board and search the vessel for prohibited cargo. He did not want a war. He only wanted to follow his instructions. But in these narrow waters, the line between a search and a provocation was thinner than a razor. Reza spoke into his headset. Increase speed. Prepare the boarding team. His second-in-command looked at the American ship. The Americans are not slowing down. They will, Reza said. They have no choice. Back on the Ocean Atlas, the general alarm began to wail. It was a rhythmic and lonely sound in the middle of the empty sea. The ship carried thousands of tons of food and medical supplies for the fleet. It carried 0 weapons. The crew consisted of 24 civilians. They were mariners, not soldiers. They watched from the railings. As the speedboats pulled alongside the towering steel walls of their ship, the Iranian sailors were visible now. They wore dark green uniforms and heavy tactical vests. They carried assault rifles. The morning sun glinted off the polished barrels of the weapons. There was no shouting yet. There was only the roar of the engines and the crashing of the waves against the hull. The radio on the bridge crackled to life. A voice spoke in clear, accented English. American vessel Ocean Atlas. This is the Iranian Navy. You are ordered to stop your engines immediately for inspection. Miller picked up the handset. His voice was steady. Iranian Navy. This is the Ocean Atlas. We are in international waters. We are a non-combatant vessel. We are maintaining our course and speed. The response was immediate. Ocean Atlas. Stop your engines or we will take control of your vessel by force. You have 30 seconds to comply. Miller looked at the clock on the bulkhead. It was 7:13 in the morning. The nearest help was still 9 minutes away. The speedboats were now so close that the spray from their wakes was hitting the side of the ship. The commandos were reaching for their boarding ladders. The morning was still quiet. It would not stay that way. 7:15 in the morning. The Strait of Hormuz. Captain Miller looked at the engine telegraph. He had no weapons. He had no security team. He looked at the helmsman and gave the order he never wanted to give. Stop engines. All stop. The deep, rhythmic vibration of the massive diesel engines began to fade. The Ocean Atlas was no longer a vessel in transit. It was a 400-foot island of steel, drifting slowly in one of the most dangerous corridors in the world. Across the water, Commander Reza saw the exhaust from the American ship's stacks turn from gray to white. The wake behind the vessel began to flatten into a smooth trail. He nodded to his boarding team. They are complying. Move in. Stay sharp. The lead Iranian speedboat slammed into the side of the hull. The impact echoed through the steel plates like a massive hammer. One commando threw a heavy, motorized magnetic ladder against the gray paint. It clamped onto the hull with a loud metallic crack. The team began to climb. They moved with the practiced speed of elite naval commandos. Their boots gripped the rungs as they ascended the 30-foot wall of steel. They reached the railing and vaulted onto the deck in seconds. Inside the ship, the American crew followed their emergency protocols. They were merchant mariners, trained to handle fires and storms, not armed incursions. They moved toward the designated safe zone near the engine room. They did not try to fight. The chief engineer locked the heavy steel door of the safe room. He looked at his team. Their faces were pale in the harsh glow of the emergency lighting. The only sound was the heavy thud of boots hitting the deck plates above them. 7:18 in the morning. On the bridge of the USS Indianapolis, Commander Sarah Vaughn watched the blue icon representing the Ocean Atlas on her tactical display. The icon had stopped moving. Her ship was still 8 miles away. The littoral combat ship was vibrating violently as its water jets pushed the vessel to 45 knots. The sea was spray on glass, but the speed of the ship made the bridge feel like it was inside a storm. Vaughn spoke to her tactical officer. Status of the orders. I need eyes. The officer adjusted the controls on a high-definition camera. They are on the deck, Commander. Thermal imaging shows 12 individuals moving toward the bridge and the cargo hold. They are armed with assault rifles. I count at least 2 light machine guns being set, up on the railing. Vaughn turned to the radio. Ocean Atlas. This is the USS Indianapolis. We are 6 minutes out. Do not resist. The boarding party. We are coming to assist. Stand by. There was no answer from the merchant ship. Only the hiss of static filled the bridge. 7:20 in the morning. Commander Reza reached the main deck. He looked up at the towering white bridge structure. His men were fanning out with professional precision. One group headed for the cargo hatches to verify the manifest. Another followed Reza toward the stairs leading to the command deck. He keyed his radio, speaking to his team in Persian. Bridge team, move, secure the captain. Do not fire unless fired upon. We are here for the cargo. The Iranian commandos kicked open the first interior door. The sound of heavy boots on metal stairs filled the corridors of the Ocean Atlas. Miller stood in the center of the bridge. He kept his hands visible and away from his belt. He watched. The door burst open. 4 men in tactical gear entered, their weapons leveled. Reza was the last to enter. He lowered his rifle slightly when he saw Miller. The room was silent for a long moment. The only sound was the wind whistling through the bridge wing doors. The first contact was over. The occupation had begun. 7:25 in the morning. The Gulf of Oman. The bridge of the USS Indianapolis was a hive of controlled intensity. Commander Sarah Vaughn stood behind the tactical console. The ship was vibrating so hard from the water jets that the coffee in her mug was jumping in rhythm with the engines. They were 5 miles from the Ocean Atlas. On the digital display, the blue icon of the supply ship was now surrounded by 3 red dots. Vaughn spoke to the tactical officer. I want a clear picture. What are the speedboats doing now? The officer looked at the radar returns. 2 of the fast attack craft have moved to the bow and stern of the supply ship. They are acting as a screen. The third is still tethered to the hull. They are established. Commander, they have the high ground on that deck. Vaughn knew the math. Her ship was faster and more powerful, but the Iranians had the leverage. They had 24 American civilians under their control. Any aggressive move by the Indianapolis could trigger a tragedy on the deck of the merchant ship. Check the wider area, Vaughn ordered. They did not do this without backup. 7:29 in the morning. The radar technician adjusted the gain on his console. 2 new contacts appeared on the screen. They were coming from the north, moving at 30 knots. Commander, we have 2 Iranian corvettes entering the sector. They are 5 miles out and closing fast. They are positioning themselves between us and the Ocean Atlas. This was the escalation. The speedboats were the boarding team. The corvettes were the muscle. The Strait of Hormuz was narrowing by the second. Inside the bridge of the Ocean Atlas, Commander Reza looked at the digital navigation screen. He saw the USS Indianapolis closing the distance. He also saw the two Iranian corvettes, the Sahand and the Alborz, moving into intercept positions. He looked at Captain Miller. Reza spoke with a calm, professional tone. "Your warship is approaching. Tell them to stay back. If they cross into this zone, my orders are to defend this vessel. I do not want your sailors to die because of a cargo dispute." Miller did not move. "You are the one who boarded us. You are the one who created the spraying zone. If you want peace, get off my ship." Reza turned to his radio operator. "Signal the corvettes. Tell them the Americans' bruise are 4 miles out. Power up the fire control radars. We must show them we are serious." 7:32 in the morning. On the USS Indianapolis, an alarm began to chirp. It was a low, persistent sound. The electronic warfare officer looked up. "Commander, we are being painted by fire control radar. The Iranian corvette Sahand just locked onto us. They are tracking us for a place-bearer cord missile solution." Vaughn felt the hair on her neck stand up. A radar lock was a final warning. It was the digital equivalent of a finger tightening on a trigger. She spoke into the fleet radio. "All stations. This is Guardian 1. We are under a fire control lock. I am authorizing the activation of our defensive suites. Do not fire unless I give the word. We are holding course." The Indianapolis was now only 3 miles from the merchant ship. The massive gray hull of the Iranian corvette was visible on the horizon. The two warships were staring each other down across a very small patch of ocean. One nervous hand or one mechanical failure could start a war that neither side had planned for. Vaughn looked at the countdown on the screen. 2 minutes until they reached the intercept point. The tension in the room was a physical weight. The tactical officer looked at Vaughn. "Commander, they are opening their missile bay doors. They are preparing to launch." 7:35 in the morning. The deck of the Ocean Atlas. 12 commandos had completed their initial sweep. 6 of them were now stationed at the main cargo hatches. They were using pneumatic cutters to break the seals on the heavy shipping containers. The high-pitched whine of the tools echoed across the empty water. On the bridge, Commander Reza stood by the window. He watched the USS Indianapolis through his binoculars. The American warship was a low, gray shape cutting through the sea. It was close enough now that he could see the hull numbers. Reza spoke to Captain Miller. "My men are checking the manifest. If the cargo matches your papers, we will leave. If it does not, this ship will be taken to Bandar Abbas." Miller did not blink. "The cargo is rice, flour, medical kits. You are wasting your time and risking a conflict over a grocery list." Reza looked at his watch. 7:37 in the morning. "We will know the truth in minutes." Below the bridge, the Iranian commandos pulled back the heavy steel doors of the first container. They found crates stacked to the ceiling. One soldier used a combat knife to pry open a wooden box. He reached inside. He pulled out a bag of grain. He moved to the next crate. It contained boxes of surgical masks. He keyed his radio and spoke to Reza. Nothing in the first hold. Moving to the second. 7:39 in the morning. The Combat Information Center of the USS Indianapolis. Commander Vaughn stood in the dim blue light of the command center. Her eyes were fixed on the thermal feed. She could see the heat signatures of the Iranian commandos on the deck of the merchant ship. They were clustered around the cargo holds like shadows. The tactical officer spoke urgently. "Commander, the Iranian corvette Sahand is maneuvering. They are trying to block our line of sight to the merchant ship. They are shielding the boarding operation." Vaughn made a decision. "Increase speed to 48 knots. We are going to pass between the corvettes. We need to be close enough to provide immediate support if they start shooting." The Indianapolis leaned hard to the left. The water jets roared with a deafening thunder. The ship felt like it was skidding across the surface of the ocean. It was a massive machine pushed to its absolute limit. 7:40 in the morning. The Indianapolis surged past the first Iranian corvette. The two ships were less than 300 meters apart. On the bridge of the Sahand, the Iranian captain watched the American ship fly past. He saw the spray from its wake hitting his windows. He did not give the order to fire. Not yet. Inside the Ocean Atlas, the commandos were moving to the second cargo hold. They were looking for something specific, something they had been told would be there. They began to throw crates onto the deck. The professional search was turning into a frantic hunt. The search was getting more aggressive. The tension on the deck was rising. 7:42 in the morning. The Strait of Hormuz was now a crowded corridor of high-tension steel. The USS Indianapolis was screaming through the water. Commander Vaughn felt the ship shudder as it hit the wake of the Iranian corvette Sahand. On the tactical screen, the distance between the two warships was closing to less than 200 meters. This was no longer a long-range standoff. It was a knife fight without a single shot fired. Vaughn looked at her tactical officer. What are the rules of engagement for a boarded civilian vessel in this sector? The officer did not look up from his screen. Commander, the rules are ambiguous. We are authorized to use force to defend ourselves. We are authorized to defend American-flagged vessels. But the Ocean Atlas is a Marshall Islands-flagged ship under American contract. We have no clear protocol for a boarding that has already occurred. This was the gap in the manual. If the Iranians had fired on the ship, the response would be clear. But they had climbed the rails and taken control. To fire now would be to risk hitting the American crew or the merchant ship itself. It would be an act of war initiated by the United States. Vaughn spoke into the internal comms. Combat Information Center. Maintain a tracking lock on both corvettes. If they rotate their turrets toward us, we have a green light for defensive fire. Until then, we hold. 7:44 in the morning. On the bridge of the Iranian corvette Sahand, the atmosphere was equally taut. The captain watched the American littoral combat ship. It was smaller than his vessel, but faster and packed with modern electronics. He could see the American sailors on the bridge wings through his glass. His executive officer leaned in. Captain, the Americans are not yielding. They are pushing into the gap between us and the merchant ship. We are losing our screening position. The captain gripped the railing. Close the gap. Use the hull. We will not let them reach the Ocean Atlas. The Sahand began to turn. It was a massive, heavy maneuver. The goal was to physically block the Indianapolis from getting any closer to the boarded supply ship. The two vessels were now on a near-collision course. A few degrees of rudder were all that separated a tense encounter from a catastrophic impact. 7:46 in the morning. On the deck of the Ocean Atlas, the search was growing more desperate. The Iranian commandos had moved to the third cargo hold. They were no longer carefully opening crates. They were smashing them open with crowbars. The lead commando was shouting into his radio. He was looking for something that was not there. Commander Reza watched from the bridge. He saw the two warships maneuvering wildly only a few hundred meters away. He saw the white spray of their wakes clashing in the center of the channel. He realized that the situation was slipping out of his control. His mission was a search, but the two ships outside were preparing for a battle. He looked at Captain Miller. Your ship is carrying something you did not report. My men will find it, and when they do, your warship will not be able to save you. Miller stayed silent. He knew what was in his holds. He knew there were no weapons. He also knew that in a moment of extreme tension, people see what they expect to see, not what is actually there. The two corvettes and the American warship were now so close that the sound of their engines was a single, deafening roar that filled the air. The water between them was a white, boiling mess of foam and current. The crisis was reaching its limit. 7:48 in the morning. The USS Indianapolis was 200 meters from the Iranian corvette Sahand. The roar of the water jets was a physical scream. The hulls were so close that the wake from the American ship was washing over the deck of the Iranian vessel. Commander Vaughn stood on the bridge wing. She could see the individual rivets on the side of the Iranian ship. The vibration was a violent shudder in her teeth. The tactical officer shouted over the engine noise. We have a collision warning. They are crossing our bow. 50 meters to impact. Vaughn did not flinch. Her voice was cold. Hold course. We do not yield. If they want to trade steel, we will trade steel. 7:48 and 30 seconds in the morning. On the bridge of the Sahand, the gunnery officer gripped his controls. The 57mm main gun was tracked onto the American bridge. It moved in perfect synchronization with the movement of the ships. The Iranian captain spoke to his weapons officer. Arm the anti-ship missiles. Target their engine room. If they touch our hull, fire everything. The computer chirped. The lock was solid. A red light blinked on the console. The ship was ready to kill. 7:49 in the morning. On the deck of the Ocean Atlas, a commando kicked a heavy crate in the third hold. It was labeled medical supplies. Inside, he saw a row of heavy metallic cylinders. He did not see the fine print on the labels. He only saw the olive drab paint and the pressure gauges. The commando spoke into his radio. His voice was urgent. "Commander, we have found them. Possible warheads. Hold 3. Repeat. We have found the contraband." Commander Reza heard the report on the bridge. He looked at Captain Miller. His hand went to the holster of his sidearm. The professionalism of the morning evaporated. Reza said, "You lied. We found the weapons. You are now a legitimate target." Miller shook his head. He did not reach for anything. "Those are oxygen tanks for the field hospital in Bahrain. Look closer. You are making a mistake that will start a war." Reza ignored him. He spoke into the fleet radio. "All units, we have confirmed prohibited cargo. The Americans are attempting to interfere. Engage if necessary." 7:49 and 30 seconds in the morning. The Indianapolis was now 40 meters from the Sahand. The two hulls were parallel. The air was pressurized with the threat of immediate death. On the tactical screens in Washington and Tehran, the icons were overlapping. Every weapon was hot. Every radar was locked. Every finger was on a trigger. The entire weight of two nations was resting on the nerves of two captains and one commando on a pile of oxygen tanks. The world seemed to stop moving. 7:50 in the morning. The Strait of Hormuz. The proximity alarm on the USS Indianapolis was no longer a chirp. It was a scream. The Iranian corvette Sahand was 30 meters away and closing. The air between the two ships was compressed. The water was a chaotic white foam. Commander Vaughn gripped the edge of the command chair. She was ready to give the order to fire. Then, the world stopped. A high-priority flash message hit the screens in the Combat Information Center. It was a red-line communication from the Joint Chiefs of Staff. At the exact same moment, the radio in Commander Reza's ear on the Ocean Atlas erupted with a voice from Iranian Naval Headquarters in Bandar Abbas. The voice was not aggressive. It was frantic. "All units, stand down. Disengage all boarding operations immediately. This is a primary override. Confirm. Abort now." On the bridge of the USS Indianapolis, the tactical officer stared at his screen. "Commander, the radar lock is gone. The Sahand is breaking away. They are turning hard to starboard." Vaughn watched the massive Iranian hull tilt as it executed an emergency turn. The collision was avoided by less than 20 meters. The wake from the Iranian ship slammed into the side of the Indianapolis, rocking the vessel. But the guns were no longer tracking. 7:51 in the morning. On the deck of the Ocean Atlas, the commando in Hold 3 was still looking at the metallic cylinders. He wiped a layer of industrial grease from the side of a tank. Beneath the grime, the label was clear. It was written in English and Persian. It read, "Medical-grade oxygen, for hospital use only." He keyed his radio. His voice was hollow. "Commander, the cargo. It is not warheads, they are hospital supplies." The markings were obscured by shipping residue. On the bridge, Commander Reza felt the blood drain from his face. He looked at Captain Miller. The American captain had not moved. He was still standing with his hands visible. He looked like a man who had been through a storm and survived. Reza's radio spoke again. It was the admiral in Bandar Abbas. The intelligence was a fabrication. "A third-party actor planted a false manifest in our network. We have been manipulated. Withdraw your men before the Americans lose their patience." The pivot was absolute. The tension that had built for 40 minutes evaporated into a cold, clinical embarrassment. The two most powerful navies in the region had almost started a war over a database error and a few crates of oxygen. 7:53 in the morning. Commander Reza lowered his weapon. He turned to his men. "Return to the craft. We are finished here." He looked back at Captain Miller. There was no apology in his eyes. There was only the look of a professional who had realized he was a pawn in a game he did not control. Reza spoke into the radio. Iranian Naval Command to Ocean Atlas. You are cleared to resume your course. We are disengaging. Miller nodded once. Safe travels. The Iranian commandos began to climb back over the railing. They moved with the same speed they had used to board, but the energy was gone. They were no longer hunters. They were sailors caught in a geopolitical glitch. Inside the USS Indianapolis, Commander Vaughn exhaled for the first time in 10 minutes. She watched the red dots on her screen move away from the blue icon of the supply ship. The crisis was over, but the questions were only beginning. The sky was still blue, the water was still green, but the sea felt different now. 7:52 in the morning. The deck of the Ocean Atlas. The 12 Iranian commandos moved in a tight, defensive formation toward the port railing. The high-pitched whine of the magnetic ladders filled the air as they were disengaged from the steel hull. Their weapons were now slung over their shoulders, barrels pointed toward the deck plates. They did not look at the American sailors who were beginning to emerge from the hatches and safe zones. There was a strange, heavy silence on the ship. The roar of the speedboats idling alongside was the only constant sound. One commando paused by the crate of oxygen tanks in hold 3. He kicked a piece of broken wood from the crate he had smashed open only minutes before. He looked at the bridge, then at the horizon. There was no glory in a mistake this large. He vaulted over the rail and slid down the ladder into the waiting boat. 7:54 in the morning. Commander Reza stood on the bridge wing of the Ocean Atlas. He watched his men descend the ladders into the bobbing speedboats below. The spray from the ocean was cooling the salt on his skin. Captain Miller stood 3 feet away, his arms crossed over his chest. The tension was no longer about a potential explosion. It was about the weight of the silence between two professionals who had nearly destroyed each other. Miller spoke first. His voice was low. Your people got bad intelligence. Someone wanted this to happen. Reza did not turn his head to look at him. He watched the last of his men reach the speedboat. In this part of the world, intelligence is often a weapon used by someone else. We were told there were missiles on this ship. We were told you were a shadow transport. You were told a lie, Miller replied. And you almost burned the whole Strait down to prove it. Reza stepped toward the ladder. You are lucky my men are disciplined. If a single one of your sailors had reached for a wrench, this deck would be red. I think we were both lucky today, Commander, Miller said. Don't come back. Reza did not answer. He swung himself over the railing and disappeared into the morning glare. 7:55 in the morning. The USS Indianapolis began to slow its pace. The violent vibration of the water jets subsided into a low, powerful hum that resonated through the deck. The ship felt heavy as it came off its plane and settled into the water. Commander Vaughn watched the Iranian corvettes through the long-range optics. They were no longer aggressive. They were turning back toward the coast of Iran, their wakes crossing behind them like fading scars on the water. Vaughn keyed the internal circuit. Combat Information Center. Status of the Ocean Atlas. The tactical officer responded immediately. The boarders have cleared the deck, Commander. The speedboats are moving off at high speed toward the north. The merchant ship is reporting no casualties and no structural damage. They are requesting permission to resume their original transit. Vaughn sat back in her command chair. Her hands were steady, but the adrenaline was still burning in her chest. The bridge crew was silent, staring at their consoles. They had just spent 20 minutes on the edge of a total war. Now, the world was returning to its normal, quiet state. Inform the fleet, Vaughn said. The boarding is over. The threat is neutralized. We are maintaining a 3-mile tether on the Ocean Atlas until they clear the strait. And tell the engine room they did a hell of a job. The tactical officer nodded. Copy that, Commander. The Sahand is now 5 miles out and opening the distance. They are off our scopes for target lock. The physical conflict had ended, but in the shadows of the command centers in Bahrain and Tehran, the reassessment was just beginning. Digital analysts were already scrubbing the logs. They were looking for the ghost in the machine. They were looking for the person who had sent the Iranian Navy to search for missiles that did not exist. The morning was warm. The danger was cold. 8 o'clock in the morning, the bridge of the Ocean Atlas. Captain Miller reached for the engine telegraph. The metal handle felt cold and solid in his hand. He pushed it forward to slow ahead. Deep below the waterline, the massive six-cylinder diesel engines groaned back to life. A slight vibration returned to the floorboards. It was a comforting, familiar shudder. The ship was no longer a drifting target. It was a vessel under command once more. Miller looked at the helmsman. "Bring us to course 180. Let us get out of these narrows." The helmsman turned the wheel. "Course 180, sir. Coming around now." Outside the window, the 3 Iranian fast attack craft were small white streaks against the blue water. They were moving at high speed toward the north, returning to the Iranian coastline. The danger had passed as quickly as a summer storm, but the deck was still littered with broken crates and the marks of tactical boots. The physical evidence of the intrusion remained. 8:04 in the morning. Commander Reza sat on the bench of the lead fast attack craft. The wind was whipping past his helmet at 40 knots. He looked back at the receding silhouette of the Ocean Atlas. His mission had been a failure. He had boarded a neutral ship, threatened a civilian crew, and nearly provoked a battle with an American warship, all for a cargo of medical oxygen. He keyed his radio to speak to his base. "Control. This is Reza. We are clear of the intercept zone. All teams are accounted for. No casualties. No shots fired." The voice from Bandar Abbas was tight. "Copy that. Return to port for immediate debriefing. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs is already fielding calls from Washington. Someone will answer for this mistake." Reza did not respond. He knew how the system worked. When a mistake was made at the strategic level, the tactical commander often carried the weight of it. He watched the white wake of his boat crossing the blue water. He felt a strange sense of relief that he had not pulled the trigger. The margin had been seconds. 8:10 in the morning. The USS Indianapolis held its position 3 miles to the south of the merchant ship. It was no longer screaming through the water at flank speed. It was moving at a stately 12 knots, acting as a protective shield between the Ocean Atlas and the Iranian coast. Commander Vaughn stood on the bridge wing. She watched the horizon through a pair of high-powered binoculars. The Iranian corvettes were now just gray smudges on the radar screen. The immediate kinetic threat was gone. The radio operator spoke. "Commander, Captain Miller of the Ocean Atlas is on the line. He wants to thank us for the support." Vaughn took the handset. "Captain Miller, this is Commander Vaughn. We are glad to see you moving again. We will stay on your flank until you clear the strait and enter the open waters of the Gulf of Oman." Miller's voice sounded tired but grateful. "Copy that, Indianapolis. My crew is shaken up, but they are back at their stations. We are lucky you were in the neighborhood." "We are always in the neighborhood, Captain," Vaughn replied. "Maintain your course. We have the watch." She handed the radio back and looked at her tactical officer. "What was the source of that intel the Iranians were acting on? Do we have a lead?" The officer shook his head. "National Security Agency is looking into it. They say the original manifest was altered at the port of departure in Oman. It was a sophisticated hack. It was designed to look like a clandestine weapons shipment. Whoever did this knew exactly which buttons to push to get the Iranian Navy to react." The crisis had resolved, but a new mystery was taking its place. 8:15 in the morning. The eastern exit of the Strait of Hormuz. The USS Indianapolis began its final approach to the Ocean Atlas. The two ships were now in deeper water, moving away from the narrowest part of the channel. The littoral combat ship moved with a smooth and predatory grace, its gray hull reflecting the brightening morning sun. On the bridge, Commander Vaughn watched the merchant ship through the high-definition cameras. The American crew members were visible on the deck. They were picking up debris and securing the cargo hatches that the Iranians had forced open. Vaughn spoke to her executive officer. "I want a full visual inspection of their hull. Make sure those boarding ladders did not cause any structural issues or leave any tracking devices behind." The officer nodded. "Understood. The drone is already in the air. We are doing a low-level flyby now. A small, quiet drone buzzed over the deck of the Ocean Atlas. It captured images of the scratched paint and the bent railings. It also captured the faces of the merchant sailors. They looked exhausted. Some were sitting on crates, drinking water, and staring at the horizon. There was no cheering. There was only the quiet relief of men who had seen the end of their lives and then been given a second chance. 8:22 in the morning. 10 miles to the north, the Iranian corvette Sahand crossed the 12-mile limit back into Iranian territorial waters. The radar lock on the USS Indianapolis had been cold for 10 minutes. The ship was no longer a combatant. It was a vessel returning to base after a failed operation. On the bridge, the Iranian captain stood in silence. He watched the digital map as the American warship faded into a small blue icon on the edge of his range. The weapons officer spoke. "Captain, should I stand down the missile cruise?" The captain looked at him. His voice was flat. "The mission is over. Secure all weapons. Inform the fleet that we have returned to sovereign waters. There will be a full inquiry into the intelligence failure at Bandar Abbas." The crew moved with a mechanical efficiency. They were professionals, but the atmosphere on the bridge was heavy with the weight of what had almost happened. They had come within seconds of a kinetic engagement with a United States warship. The silence in the room was the sound of 20 men processing a narrow escape. 8:30 in the morning. The USS Indianapolis pulled within 500 meters of the Ocean Atlas. The two ships were now moving in perfect formation. The sea was opening up into the Gulf of Oman. The pressure of the narrow strait was gone. Commander Vaughn picked up the radio handset. "Ocean Atlas, this is Guardian 1. Our drone inspection is complete. Your hull is clear. We are going to maintain our escort for another 20 miles. Then we will break off for our scheduled patrol." Captain Miller responded from the bridge of the supply ship. "Thank you, Guardian 1. We are continuing to Salalah. We have a lot of paperwork to do before we get there. I appreciate you being here. It would have been a very different morning without that gray hull on our flank." Vaughn looked out at the vast, empty expanse of the Indian Ocean ahead of them. "That is why we are here, Captain. Safe travels to Oman. Guardian 1 out." She hung up the handset and looked at the tactical display. The red icons of the Iranian Navy were gone. The blue icons of the American fleet were scattered across the region. The map looked the same as it had at 7 in the morning, but everything had changed. The fragility of the peace in the Strait had been exposed. A single false manifest and a few crates of oxygen had nearly triggered a war. Vaughn turned to her crew. "Secure from general quarters. Revert to condition 3. Let us get back to work." The sailors on the bridge began to relax. The intense vibration of the high-speed transit was a memory. The ship was quiet. The crisis had fully resolved. There were no medals for what had happened. There was only the knowledge that a catastrophe had been avoided by the narrowest of margins. The Ocean Atlas continued its slow journey south. The USS Indianapolis turned slightly to the east, its wake crossing the path of the merchant ship one last time. 1:30 in the afternoon. Naval Support Activity Bahrain. The air-conditioned chill of the Maritime Operations Center was a sharp contrast to the humid heat of the Gulf. A team of digital forensic analysts sat in front of a wall of monitors. They were not looking at radar tracks anymore. They were looking at code. The Ocean Atlas was 500 miles away now, but its digital ghost was still being dissected here. An analyst pointed to a line of text on the screen. "There it is, the injection point." A senior officer leaned in. "Explain. How did they miss this?" The analyst tapped a key. The manifest was altered 3 days before the ship left Oman. It was not a manual entry. It was an automated script that mimicked the port authority's encryption. To the Iranian intelligence monitors, it looked like a legitimate, high-priority military shipment. It was designed to be found. The officer rubbed his eyes. A digital trap. Someone wanted a kinetic response. Yes, sir. If the USS Indianapolis had fired, or if the Iranians had been more aggressive, the world would be looking at a sunken merchant ship and a regional war, all based on a dozen lines of malicious code. 2:45 in the afternoon. The naval headquarters in Bandar Abbas. Commander Reza stood at attention in a wood-paneled office. The room smelled of old paper and tobacco. Across from him, a high-ranking admiral sat behind a heavy desk. The admiral did not look angry. He looked exhausted. He was looking at a report from the boarding team on the Ocean Atlas. The admiral spoke without looking up. The Americans have already released a statement. They are calling it a professional de-escalation. But we know the truth. We were led by the nose into a trap. Reza kept his eyes fixed on the wall. My men followed their orders, Admiral. We confirmed the cargo was medical as soon as the confusion was cleared. The confusion should never have existed, the Admiral said. The intelligence branch failed us, but you were the one on that deck. You were the one with the gun. You chose not to fire. That is the only reason we are having this conversation in an office and not a bunker. 7 o'clock in the evening. The Pentagon, Washington District of Columbia. The sun was setting over the Potomac River. Inside the National Military Command Center, a briefing was concluding. The maps on the wall showed the Strait of Hormuz in calm, peaceful blue. The crisis was officially over. But the strategic assessment was just beginning. The briefing officer closed his folder. The analysis is clear. This was a sophisticated spoofing operation. It was not a mistake by either the United States or Iran. A third party attempted to provoke a conflict by manipulating the digital maritime infrastructure. They weaponized our own intelligence gathering systems against us. A general at the table looked at the map. We're moving into an era where a hacker in a basement can deploy a carrier strike group. We were lucky today. The captains on the ground had more common sense than the systems they were using. The briefing ended. The lights in the room were dimmed. The world continued to turn. But the lesson of the Ocean Atlas was written in the classified logs of two rival navies. In the modern age, the most dangerous weapon is not a missile. It is a lie that looks like the truth. The investigation was moving from the water to the servers. The danger had not disappeared. It had only changed its shape. 3 days later, 9 in the morning, the port of Salalah, Oman, the Ocean Atlas sat quietly against the concrete pier. The morning sun was already hot. It turned the gray hull of the ship into a radiating wall of heat. Gigantic yellow cranes were lifting the white shipping containers from its deck. One by one, the crates were lowered onto waiting trucks. In the cargo hold where the Iranian commandos had stood, there was only the smell of dust and stagnant air. The metallic cylinders that had almost started a war were now being loaded onto a transport heading for a regional hospital. They were just containers of oxygen. They were tools for saving lives. To the men who had looked through the lens of a tactical display, they had looked like the end of the world. 400 miles to the north, the USS Indianapolis was cutting through a calm and glassy sea. It was back on a routine patrol. Commander Vaughn was in her cabin, reviewing the final after-action report. She typed slowly. She described the radar lock. She described the 60-second countdown to a missile launch. She did not write about the feeling in her chest when the Iranian corvette turned away. Military reports do not have a section for relief. They only have data. In Tehran, the investigation into the digital breach was ongoing. Technicians had found a trail of encrypted breadcrumbs leading to a server farm in a neutral country. The actor was not a nation-state. It was a private group with a financial interest in regional instability. They had almost bought a war for the price of a few lines of code. They had used the tension of the Strait of Hormuz as a magnifying glass for their own agenda. Strategic analysts would later call this the first true incident of kinetic cyber manipulation. It was a warning to every navy in the world. The systems are fast. The missiles are precise. The sensors are all-seeing. But the systems can be lied to. They can be hacked. They can be turned into a trap by an invisible enemy. On that morning in the Strait, the technology had failed both sides. The high-definition cameras had seen warheads where there was only medicine. The fire control computers had calculated a path to destruction based on a fake manifest. The only thing that stopped the sequence was the human being in the loop, a captain who chose to wait, a commander who chose to hold her fire, a commando who bothered to look twice at a label before pulling a trigger. Modern warfare is often described as a game of speed and technology, but as the Ocean Atlas cleared its holds, the truth was simpler. The peace of the world is held together by the thin thread of human judgment. It is decided not by the speed of the processor, but by the restraint of the person behind the screen. The next time the line is crossed, the machines may not be so easy to stop. The ghost in the machine is still there. It is waiting for the next ship to pass. It is waiting for the next moment of doubt. The Strait of Hormuz remained quiet. The water was blue. The sun was hot. The ships continued to move through the narrow channel, carrying the cargo of the world. Each wake was a temporary mark on a permanent frontier. The morning was over. The watch continued.